I'll turn on my green. Good evening. Welcome to our city council meeting. It's kind of a special work meeting. We're going to do a strategy session for the next hour. We do have a hard stop at 6 o'clock or maybe 5:02. Let's say 5:02 so we can transition, so we can start right at 6 for the next group. So Nathan, I'm just going to turn it to you, right? That's all we're going to do, right? Are we just going to, do we need to start and do all this, or do we want to make a jump to?
We can do that if there's anything you want to change or add, maybe cover section 1.
You want to, section 1, okay. So we'll read that. Any review of tonight of agenda items, changes, comments, okay? Future agenda items. I am being asked to see if we will have a quorum on the 25th.
It is
This
during
fall break.
Yep.
The Wednesday of fall break.
May not. Tentatively.
23rd, I'm looking. I think it's the 23rd.
It should be the 23rd. Sorry,
23rd.
25th 's Friday. Yeah.
Oh, you're fine. I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Teddy?
I
Awesome.
think I should be good. Yeah.
We'll move ahead with it.
We'll plan on it.
Okay. Okay. Discussion of future citizen recognitions. We did have 2 through our new little fancy nomination form. The one is we had them run through the system, through the process that gentleman that did our kite festival on that Sunday a few months ago. I'm pretty sure he's actually coming tonight. There's some, this was before, we had talked about this before this change. So if you guys are okay with, I think he's coming tonight, just to be recognized tonight. I think Antonio was going to help with that. Then the one I think we should consider came from Kevin Allred, who's at Salt Lake Academy now. Wants to recommended we not recognize the Salt Lake Academy boys soccer, who won the Region 2 championship last year, which is the 6A Region 2. So they were the region champs. So any thoughts on that? The boys soccer.
That's fine.
Are we okay doing it? Okay. Okay. My concern is that some could have been seniors because this would have been a spring sport. But we can recognize those who might be here. So do you want to contact Kevin? Are you okay contacting Kevin and finding the date then? Okay.
Begs the question though, is there any limit or level of achievement that we as a community are not going to recognize or something like,
I agree. That's the question, I think. So I don't know. I mean, I know enough
the
about
11-year-old stick equestrian team, beat the other kids down the street kind of thing. I mean, I don't be facetious, but I mean, with all of the schools that we have, all of the athletic things that are going on, all of the arts things that are going on, music groups, all of that stuff, to talk about every single achievement at a city level like that, I'm not sure is appropriate, would be my comment. And so, not that I'm trying to exclude anybody or say, but if there's a division or a region championship, is that the same thing as, gold medalist or a national championship or state championship, the other things that we've acknowledged?
fair question. I think that's a fair question. Jared can chime in on this one.
Sorry, what?
A region championship soccer for recognition.
For Salt Lake Academy. That was kind of the same time we had.
Maybe kind of like the banner thing. Maybe we just start down. I think we're okay with this. And then if it starts, maybe if we start getting inundated, we can set a higher bar
Somebody
at that point.
recommended, but I'm not like opposed to it or anything.
Right. No, we're going to have to, it could get to that point for sure. Okay. Okay. So we'll go ahead with that then. Okay. Okay. Then we'll jump into, so just people that are just getting here. I mean, so everybody knows, we're going to do 2.1 until 5:55. Then we'll adjourn. Well, actually, I guess we're going to go to that. 2.2. Okay, so actually we're just going down, we're just got a tail limit basically on 2.1 is really what we're doing.
So we'll do 2.1 till 5:55 and then we'll stop and
Take
transition
pause.
to the next item. It will
Bring
pick it
the
up a
planning
different
commission
day.
in.
So it's a hard stop for this evening. So
Okay.
this is the only time we're talking about this.
Nathan?
So, hopefully you had a chance to look at the staff report. You received sent you the list ahead of time. It also came in the staff report. I'm hoping you all selected your 4. So we can, so let me explain what this might be a little uncomfortable because you're going to have to start prioritizing even in your own minds these. So this is one of those things with the votes and stickers. It's perfectly appropriate to lobby one another. But we're gonna work through a process where we start to narrow it down. This will then feed into, say, strategic plan 2.0 as we start to refine what that looks like. There are some other conversations we'll have eventually to really narrow this down. I don't think we'll get to that tonight. So don't get too hung up on specific wording. If we get to it, we'll, but it's really concepts or topics at this point. I think now that said, you may have one very specific and that's perfectly fine. But if you don't if it's not super specific, let's not get hung up on that because like I said, I don't think we'll do it in 45 minutes, but we'll pick that up. I'm trying to do a little faster this time from when we pick it up again. So did you pick your 4? Have a format you can hand it to me? We're gonna put them up on the board and start. I know the mayor didn't pick the numbers, but we can assign where they fit, I think, in there. He was jumping ahead and trying to reword them. Yes. He's like, oh, I should word this way. It's like, we'll get to that. We will. So yeah, so if it's one that you want to focus on, we can talk about how to do that. I would pick just one of those. There are 100 of these, so there's no way in any realm or percent that we're going to focus on even 10 of them, right? We're talking about trying to get down to 3 to 4 that you could actually focus on. It doesn't mean that these are bad and that they won't be addressed at some point, and some just get hit in day-to-day operations. We will probably not say we'll cover how maybe to focus the thought process on those maybe in a future meeting. I'm used to doing this in like a day-long retreat, so I'm trying to figure out best way to break this up.
Hey, Nathan,
So,
can you
yes.
remind if they're speaking to open their mic because I can't hear the comments other than you.
So if you press it, you'll be green. So do you have your 4? Like I said, it doesn't.
Problem I have, same one Sherry has, looking at that list, and you've got
I-
to categorize these. And
So
for what it's
again,
worth, for me, I looked at it as, I think they all fit into one of these 3 categories. Public safety, I think, is by itself, infrastructure and funding.
so we're kind of jumping back. That's how our strategic plan is structured. So we laid these out. Again, let's not get focused on, oh, well, I would rather say it this way. Are there projects or concepts in here that we need to be primary? So if it's public safety, that's fine. I think it's one of these options in here. I would just pick that.
So I'm just looking down at that list and like, they all fit into. the
And
categories. So are you
they
asking what are
on this list,
our favorite projects to focus on?
off this list, because this list was generated by you and then you had staff. So this is what was of these challenges and things, what are we going to focus on?
Stability,
Okay.
safety. Road work, water.
Do you know which number that is? Trevor, would you
Public safety,
write them on our board?
73,
73, 75, We can
As
do it on the
long as
whiteboard
number
if we
8
want.
is number 8 really what you consider like? My concern is like when I looked at the city report in the packet, we had like 8 building permits versus, double figures. And so is our staff cross-trained enough? Are they trained? Okay, if this starts transitioning and having to let people go or lay people off, then this person is cross-trained where they can transfer into something that is our new growth pattern. You know what I mean? Like, in the building department, whether it's a new build or are we doing a lot of remodels and they can, cross over into that kind of stuff.
I would say let's do that under 9 staffing needs.
Okay.
Because that isn't necessarily new people, it's what staff do we need? That's how I looked at that category. If you think that would cover, because you bring up a good point, that will probably come, actually just make a list. We don't need to put them under their names. Let's just make one list because they'll know who they selected and it's fine if they select the same one. So you had that one, you had water, but staffing needs water. Financial stability.
Hard because water is infrastructure and so it can go underneath an infrastructure tab.
It could be infrastructure. It could be like actual water. Where do we get the water from? As opposed to how do we deliver it? So what was your other one? Oh, public safety. Which one was the public safety?
Our top.
75,
Making sure the water is not-
public safety. Okay. All right. Who else has?
Trying to give you my specific numbers now.
Sorry, Teddy, I talked all that time.
I thought I had written it down, but I can't find it.
So I'll give you where I came from on mine and what I did. 'Cause- And that's where and I'll admittedly, I struggled with the last time we did this exercise because it felt like when we came down to basic services, to me, that's just what a city does. Like that's going to happen. To me, that's your role is to make sure basic services happen. Financially, we'll support that, of course, but then I think our job as council is to create a vision for what we want this city to be. And I think we've started getting there. I think we've kind of started talking about kind of sports and recreation tourism destination. And that's kind of what I started to head towards is how do we, if that's our vision as a city, I'm not saying it is, but we've started taking some steps that direction. But what is that vision? If it's something like that, because a lot of cities have a vision, like an identity, I guess. And I still think Harriman's lacking that right now. I think we've transitioned from an ag city, but I think there's a new vision. So all of mine kind of aligned with that. I put, sorry, I had it and then I left.
So there's 60s council vision. Let's just put
Council vision. Then I put economic development, but of course with economic development, it's kind of a balance of land use, but I think economic development is a priority right now. I think that's where we're growing to that stage where we can really focus on taking those next steps of economic development. Then I put transportation infrastructure. I don't necessarily know what number that is, whether that be transit or east-west connectivity.
I don't remember. As long as he's good.
And then I put community engagement, which I think as we grow as a city, that's harder and harder to maintain that connection. So those are my 4.
I've got my 4 when you're ready.
All right. Did Councilor Hodges, did you have yours?
I do.
wanna
Number
just-
9, number 75, 80, and 40.
The staffing needs, so it's already up there, so we just leave. What was the other one? I wrote them down here real quick. 75, which is, I think, public safety. 80, 75 is water. 80.
I think it's public safety.
Oh,
75
transportation,
and economic development or
economic development, 40.
Councilman Hodges, did you want public safety or public works?
safety.
Okay, so he's actually not 75. He's public safety. Okay. The other two, do you have numbers?
I had a really hard time with this.
It's gonna get worse.
Um,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I get it. But, some of these seem like high level categories, and then the other parts would be subcategories under those, right? And I know that some of the other counselors have expressed their feelings about organizing these into separate kind of groups to make it a little easier. I mean, just let me give you an example. Number 21, the disconnect between the residents and government. I think that is part 16, part 21, part 26, part 31, part 65, part 73.
So
You know, I mean, it's like,
maybe this will help. We have the adopted strategic plan, which has essential services as a focus, quality of life, and engagement, community engagement. So those are still functions. This is trying to ferret out underneath there, are there certain things we should focus on? So these categories were what were thrown up on the board that night. So if there's one specifically in there that maybe is more, it could still be the broad category. It could be a specific project, but that's what we're trying to tease out. So, and again, it doesn't mean we put this whole list up. This is just a method to start getting you all to even prioritize internally how that does that.
I get it. Okay, my number then, we're number one, of course, financial stability, which is what we've all agreed to. I would probably categorize it as number 21, the disconnect between residents and government. I think at the core, that's a huge issue. The government and the people are the same. And if there's any feelings of disconnect, that we're not the same, that we're not acting in the interests of all of the residents, and they're not observing and seeing what we're doing, then government is failing. So I put number 65, the what is Harriman image and vision. I think this whole activity is kind of part of that anyway, but and then I was going to put public safety number 73, but if we're calling that an essential service, then I'm not sure that it necessarily has any more priority over water and roads and code enforcement and, you know, all that other stuff, right? So if I kind of just took the core services part kind of out of it, then the other thing I would think that's, where did I have it? Like 80, right? The transportation in and out of the city. And some of that is
It's kind of
working with our community, you know, partners to talk about where we're putting roads and where intersections are happening and how big these roads are. And are there going to be public transportation infrastructure projects that are going to be made as part of some of these other things, right? Things we're talking about all in kind of general, but I think I could take a lot of these numbers and then kind of make them sub numbers or pieces and parts of some of these other topics. So
we'll get that chance.
yeah.
Councilor Henderson, I think you're the last one.
Similar sentiments as Steve. I'm curious where this goes, what the end result is, because I feel like we are kind of going backwards. So is the question, as I look through that list and went, well, some of these are general ideas and some of these are specific projects. Like what are you wanting? What direction are you really looking from us? This,
This is a process. So by the time we get done,
are we picking projects that we're saying, yep, this is where you want to put emphasis on?
oh, could be, yeah. I'm saying right now, don't forget that we have strategic plan. I said we focus on these things, but if there are concepts in there, those are fine. If it's a project, that's okay too. This is like early. We're not going to resolve this tonight.
And Jared, the way I looked at it with, after a conversation with Nathan was, if we had 10 things from staff and they told us to pick 4 things to work on, what would we direct them to work on right now? If they had to drop a few, what would we direct them to work on?
Yeah, it could be concepts, it could be projects.
I can tell you, right? I mean, this is everything under the sun.
It is.
Saying what do you want the city to focus on? Well, if I'm a resident, which I am, I want things to operate properly and to not pay too much for it, right? As the chief has said over and over, if something happens, I want somebody to show up when I turn this tap on. I want it to work. Right? That's what a city does. If those things are working and people aren't paying too much for them, then we can talk. This is the way I look at it. I talk to my friends and neighbors. Then let's talk about the other things. But I keep writing bigger and bigger checks, and when things don't work properly, then that's where I have a problem and a disconnect. So we talk about the quality of life and what is the city known for, et cetera. We want to be known for doing our core job the best, right? And for a reasonable price. That stability, et cetera. And the rest of it, to me, the rest of it comes from that. So it feels like a disjointed conversation. So like I said, I'm curious to see where ultimately we're headed with this, because I guess that's just the way my brain works. Is are we talking about specific projects and what we have money for and over what period of time? Great, you can do that. If we're talking about culture and engagement and whatever, give me a list of things we can do on, then give me that list. But those are all things that we're responsible for and do. I guess maybe back to Lauren's point, that's kind of what we look to you guys is, okay, these are all the things we're doing. Here's our capacity. Here's our resources. Here's what we're seeing. We might have to let a few of these things go, and it's kind of your job to whittle those things down and bring those pinch points back to us. So my general categories,
yeah,
you have to be able to pay for things, financial stability,
okay,
right? Gosh, and the rest of them probably fall under the 2 categories, right? So core services, however you want to define that. I mean, water, nobody provides water to our residents but us, right? Nobody provides public safety. Nobody provides that to our residents but us.
so water.
So are those both core services? Right? And then or is water part of infrastructure, roads, etc.? So for me, it's kind of those 3 things. You got to be able to pay for things. We're responsible for the infrastructure, right? And providing those core services.
Okay.
Those are my 3.
And I think to Steve's point, I think core services are already kind of covered, and that's where he was saying is like, those are kind of,
That's what kind of
That's
took
already-
that.
so kind of take that
Kinda
out.
out of
That's
my-
already a focus. That's
Those are-
already we're not saying we're not going to focus on that. That's already a focus. This is,
Yeah, so that there are functions that we do every day that we focus at, and not tonight, but
those are big
eventually we'll talk
projects that
about
we've tasked
the
you
lenses
with-
we use to look at those.
We've tasked you with restructuring those things, right?
Okay.
Plus they're listed on.
So again, remember this list came from what are some of the challenges and opportunities the city had, and we just threw this up there. So we put them in there saying, okay, of all those, when we start to prioritize and look and narrow them down, and actually that, I did this once with a council of 7, they each got 4 and I had 25 on the list. Okay. Fairly disjointed council that took all day to work through. We have now 20 minutes. You're actually not too bad because how many are on there for 17? Well, no, not those actual specific categories. So 10. Okay, out of 20. So you're already fairly aligned. So pick your top 3. You did. But now you got to go up there and look at those and you're welcome to, we'll give you like 5 minutes. You're welcome to horse trade lobby one another. You're going to do it one more time. We got to narrow this list down. It's just process. Oh yeah, Ted, I don't know how to have Teddy participate. We can send him a picture and then he can tell which one he wants, but yeah. What are his three? Because they each got 4, now they only get 3 votes. So we could just put infrastructure up there, but part of this is to make you think through, because some of this stuff we will do regardless, but because there may be projects that tie out under these eventually, so.
But I think what the point is that it's not focus on, no matter what we get from the church, that will always be focus. All those things are working on, those are the primary focus, what we do. This is the more long term.
What?
Vision with them.
Perfect. Keep talking, because again, just put your thing, even if you think at the end, it's like, okay, we still have to do this. But I'm curious, it's a great conversation, but you gotta. Yeah. All there is. Okay, that's fine. Did Teddy read?
No one else.
All right, these are Teddy's. Okay.
Point number 1, under financial. Yeah. Financial stability,
one
right?
right
There's
here.
only so much.
That's
Discretionary part we
These
have
are-
over,
these are
right? All the
Teddy's
rest
votes.
is kind of already spent. But this, they're like, anything, throw this, throw this, throw this.
And that's what I'm saying, that's what we. This word plus right.
Yeah.
What is something we know we talk about as we.
You see, this is,
That's
to me, that's this part, right?
Yes.
Elvis Harriman, Council Vision, right? Those are.
But we talked about this, so we have in our final, I would say staff. This is our big commission.
And it's, and then here we would on
So that's what I'm saying, that's when, but if we start that.
Yeah.
Or was it the staff?
No, can't. Yeah, I can't say I'm round.
City and.
You're saying we get back to the. See, it's already been.
This is a big issue.
It's also a huge part.
Yeah.
Because a huge part of our finance.
And this.
Place, this is a huge chunk of. Thanks.
Everybody voted?
Because
He said I.
you're talking about this issue
Not yet.
in terms of this. Right. And this is honest, impacted by, I mean, if you don't have enough money, you can't put a second right? Like, there's just such an interconnectivity, so these topics, it's kind of hard to say, this one is better than the higher, more important than that one, because they're so connected, right? But I think if we're specifying in and out of city transit.
I think it's supposed to be transportation, sorry.
It's not really popular. Some of that
like regional roads or transit or busing. UTA. Thing. Who was that said that? We're not being recorded, right?
That makes sense. So really only 9. Actually, these two certain. So actually, yeah. Okay. Has everybody voted? There 3? We'll do this. Teddy did. He texted it in. Okay, so what I'm about to do doesn't mean these do not matter. If they didn't get a vote, I'm going to erase them. Right?
What's interesting is even if you erase it, it doesn't take
Let's-
economic.
Like I said, it doesn't disappear. It's just they're disappearing as a discussion.
Or it's a factor, we believe it factor, like economic development. Is that
Actually, and your discussion was, I think, really on point as you started talking, because that's eventually where this ends up, is Jared, how do we, this is a simplistic way to start narrowing down what do you really mean by your focus. So I'm also going to do something here, which some of you will go, how can you do that? Well, it's only got 1 vote. I'm just eliminating those 2. So now there's 1, 2, 3.
Chief, you're out of here.
Oh,
Just
you
saying.
missed one. You missed one. Community engagement. You're right.
Not a negative. Don't worry about it, Chief.
Right,
Man,
right, get on the board.
we improved that financial stability. We just eliminated like 27 positions in like 3 seconds. Yeah.
What we did. I'll get those off later. Okay. So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4.
You missed one because nobody
5.
voted for that one.
Oh, community engagement. Missed that one right there. Okay. Actually, there's 4 right there. That, again, having done this before, it was like 5 rounds to get those 7 people to come to any. Well, what I think it was is that you all are much more aligned in your thought process than that.
We're
group
saying it
was.
different ways, but we all are aligned, I think.
You're aligned, right? You're thinking the same. And so what was really interesting in that conversation was talking about how this financial stability has all these other pieces that have to be part of it, right? How, you don't just say, we're going to be financially stable. Okay, write that goal, Kyle, let's be financially stable. There we are, right? We don't have to do anything, all done. That is this underlying concept to a lot of things. And so we're going to have to then, I don't even know that I have to have you vote a second time because there's only 4. And that's generally where I like to be. How much time do we have? So with that, if those 4 are there, and let's just take the one that has the most votes, financial stability. And for the next little bit, talk about what that means and how we would do it. So in another meeting, because we won't have time tonight, we're going to talk about those things we just do, like public safety, but we'll talk about the lens that you need, that you want us to use. So your perspective on how you would come at a problem often dictates the options that are available, right? Whatever paradigm you use. So if at some point council's part of this is to say, did I show you? So I've written a bunch of questions on the board in my office saying, when we propose something as staff, what is the impact on our residents for good or ill, right? Is that a question we're asking? Is that a lens we're looking at before we propose something? What is the impact on our residents? So we'll have that conversation. You're welcome to borrow that one because then I'd be 3 for 3 for councils who like that concept. But it's, what is the, that's a, after we have this next little discussion, when we talk about all those other services that aren't on this list, will be helping us understand what lens you want us to use. So when we bring forward an ordinance change, we can say, this is why we're doing it, and here's how we think we're meeting there's a vision for the community. There's also a vision of how do we accomplish these things? What are we trying to do? We're not enacting ordinances just to enact ordinances. There's purpose behind that the council as a body has bought into. Doesn't mean you have to agree when we come up and if we do the analysis, you say, I don't buy that. That's totally fine. But it helps us as staff understand, because we get a lot of things and we may say, it's not on this list. It's not, we're going to just set it aside. It's a nice idea. Thank you. Put it aside for a while. So financial stability, what is that? So I heard Steve start talking about economic, what do you, maybe talk amongst the 4 or 5 of you, if Teddy wants to jump in there, what you think that actually means? What are some of the things that you would be looking for as a counselor, as a resident? How do we get there? What are some of those?
And I think Steve set it up there, and we were saying economic development falls under there because that helps. We're trying to grow that tax base to offset residential property tax. I think.
Yeah, I think Jared's comments at the beginning have a big impact on at least my definition of that, I would say. We need to have the revenues that are sufficient enough to meet the obligations that we have as a city, right? And that those obligations are, some are not debatable, some are, right? Okay.
Yep.
But achieving that revenue to meet those obligations in a way that isn't overburdening the taxpayers, right? If it's saying we're just going to jack up taxes to whatever level is needed to meet that, that's not, in my mind, what financial stability is. So as Jared was saying, in a way that's the most affordable and responsible way to kind of meet those needs is a big part of that definition of financial stability.
Yep.
I agree. One of the key things you said in our strategic plan is quality of life. And I think that, just to your point, quality of life goes away if our prices are so expensive to live here that you can't afford to live here. So then it's not financial stability. It's just overburdensome on residents. And I love what you said about how does it affect our residents? Because in my mind, that's what spurs all of my decisions, because that's our job, is to represent them.
Yeah.
How's it going to impact them? Sometimes it has a rough impact, but it's for a greater good at some point, right? It's like a water bill. It's like, it's terrible sometimes, but it's like, but this is the cost of service to provide that particular infrastructure, that particular critical need, right? So I agree with what you said, but I think it all ties back into that strategic quality of life. We have to be making enough money to pay our bills and to provide some good quality of life to our residents.
But can I?
Oh, definitely define quality of life.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I would say, like, I don't want to make this circuitous, argument thing, right? But if I'm looking at, not to get off of the subject of financial stability, but when we've talked about our vision as a council, I think that we've articulated and we've actually taken action talking about how we want to have sports and recreation and destination type of amenities in our city, right? The RSL Academy is a huge thing. The NHTSA course out there is a big thing, right? The soccer stuff that we've been talking about. There's some other organizations that have some interest about locating here, right? So we're becoming the headquarters of collegiate rugby. There's like all of these things that are starting to manifest as an identity of the city. And our ability to lever those is part of what economic development is. And that helps create more revenue streams that add to the financial stability. So does that make sense? There's a lot of these things flow into the reason why we have those other things, the infrastructure and the vision and all that stuff is creating this financially stable and sustainable model of a city, whatever that means. Thank you. Sure.
It's true.
And you're fine to jump off those categories.
I'm trying to stay where you're at,
but they're all interlinked, right?
Exactly.
I think that's what you said. The hard part is, and so as we talk through these, I think it's fine to do that. I'm just making notes of, okay, what are the thoughts and concepts you're talking about? Because that's ultimately these may just end up being, we may form new goals and bring them to you for the next discussion and say, could we heard, this is how they would fit in our strategic plan, react to this, change those, right? So we can take these wonderful concepts, that's what they are, and make them something actionable.
Yeah.
Because right now we've heard financial stability, so it's good to hear really talking about it's not just making sure that our revenues cover our expenses, but how do we grow revenue outside of, right? When we're talking about growing the pie, not
Yeah,
splitting it
because,
up differently.
Frankly, that the thing that quote unquote keeps me up at night about our role as a council is knowing the obligations that we have in the future that we have no current means of meeting
That's what keeps.
to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. Road repair and new infrastructure that we have to build. And I mean, if you just look at just the roads and traffic and stuff, I think one time we were saying it was the CIP was something like $450 million. Now, some of that's come down because we've gotten funds from the state or the other, right? But even still, call it $350 million.
It's $4 million a year to just break even on our roads. Right?
Yeah.
Just to keep them in their current condition,
And that's current roads.
Yeah.
current roads.
And
Probably have to
currently,
increase that for inflation too. I haven't.
yeah,
Yeah.
but currently our
Yes.
budget for that isn't quite 4 million.
No.
So that's what I'm saying is it's easy to compartmentalize and say, we're doing things right. We've made some really hard decisions. We've held back on staffing things. We've really had to tighten the belt to achieve current financial stability. But I would say a part of that is financial sustainability, if that makes sense, right? Our ability to meet our obligations today and in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll ask my own question too. We really should define quality of life because that bugs me sometimes to this day where they're like, oh, now we want to focus on quality of life. And I'm like, what does that even mean to you? So I think it's
I
important
still
that we
want my
have
chicken screaming at me in the morning.
exactly that we have a good definition of
Thing
it.
is, yeah.
Right.
something
Different
for
to everybody. But like
I
part
mean,
of
as
it
a
is,
council,
yeah,
we can to a certain point, right? I mean, we can use our definition of that as kind of a guidepost
yeah.
in how we want to look at things, the kind of decisions we want to make, right?
Like the rating on your roads. Do you want a D grade? Do you want an F grade? We want to make sure our roads are always, because I know what the standards are, but as Harriman City, what do we want our grading, our roads to be? And if we want to get to that, what do we have to do financially to get to that point? Those kinds of things. Because to me, that's a huge chunk of quality of life is how long I'm sitting at a red light. Or, how many lights I have to wait to make it through. Why does it take me 45 minutes to get to Bangor? Those kind of things.
So roads fail two ways, right? The surface and structure, how it rides,
And
and then moving.
ability,
Yeah,
right?
how do you move?
So, but those are things I think that we could maybe even define to some degree. These are what affects people's quality of life. How long you're sitting in traffic or, how much access do you maybe have to amenities that you enjoy.
So in our strategic plan, we talk about it next time, but I was looking at it the other day and we have incentive services, quality of life and engagement. I actually think quality of life should be first. You say, why? Because I think it's dependent on the others.
Which is your point.
Because if you could have amazing essential services and not a high quality of life, right?
Yeah.
You could just do that. There are some cities that focus on that.
But you can't have high.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that you have high quality of life if your services are terrible.
Yeah.
Right. People, they vote with their feet. They start to lead. So it's kind of a future meeting. And
I think that's a really important, right? The point is quality of life is dependent on services. Services isn't dependent upon quality. It's not.
Yeah,
Correct.
for sure.
Right. And so as you define, as we start talking about that in stream, maybe you can think about it before we have it. I'll try and do it not 6 months later. But when we have that next meeting, what do you think quality of life means? Because most of the time people, there are certain buzzwords that come around. You've sat on council, you know, if somebody wants something, they're going to hit you with, it's for economic development or it's for quality of life. And after a while, you're like, everything is that.
Alternative.
But what do you think you mean by that? Or what do your neighbors tell you? What does that mean? It's almost like one of these things it's hard to define, but you know it when you see it, you know it when you experience it.
Right.
And you also know the opposite, right? Wow, I don't want to live in this city, right? Kind of thing. If you visit, you know,
Well,
San Francisco.
yeah, there's a perspective thing, right? There are people that will express themselves here and say, when I first moved here 15 years ago, it's totally, and the city's just been ruined and the traffic is terrible and right. They have that perspective because of what they used to see.
Yeah.
My father-in-law moved here from Portland, Oregon a couple years ago and said, I can't believe how amazing this is. The traffic is wonderful and everything's so close. This is the best place. Like he just loves it. But it's a different perspective, right?
Because if you've been to Portland lately,
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a crap sandwich, man. It's horrible.
But it is that perspective, right? And that would be one of those where they put a lot into their trying to fund their essential services, but their quality of life is not very high. Right? They've got some major challenges.
Maybe close a little bit, come back to just your question. The answer to all of this is it depends. Yeah, right.
That's a very lawyer answer.
That is the answer. That's the answer I give my clients every single day. What depends on lots of factors and what you want to do and when and how and whatever. But the financial stability thing or sustainability means the same concept. As Steve put it, it's revenue to meet obligations, and that's short term, medium term, long term. From the financial planner in me, right? I immediately start breaking this compartmentalizing this and breaking it down into, all right, well, what are actionable steps to do things? Well, the first thing I do with clients is, all right, well, what's your lifestyle? What are you spending every month just to live the way you're living, right? What are your sources of income to meet that? And if there's a disconnect there, then we've got to address that first, right? That's what we've been telling you the last couple of years we want you to primarily focus on, right? I think we made pretty big strides there. So it seems like the next, maybe where you're wanting to kind of move with this is, okay, well, if we have those things structured to where we've got the income and we're paying the bills, but we have inflation happening and maybe one outpaces the other, right? Well, what I'm trying to impose myself on here in a fire district, et cetera, is that sustainable cost model, right? We want to make that as predictable as we can there. What can we control and what can we not control, right? And then same thing on the revenue side, right? If you're on a quote fixed income, there's not a whole lot you can do about that, right? Are there some things that we could do to increase that? I think, and I've mentioned this a few times, probably more than a few times, I think we need to have a smaller, more intimate meeting of these are what our revenue sources are and what they can be used for, right? So talk about all those sorts of things. Well, we get road funds that can only be used for maintenance, right? We never really talk about that. We talk about the froth at the top, if you will. Maybe there's some discretion, but those things are fixed. Well, what can we do? Well, future big decisions, if we have a little bit of foresight is the word I always use, right? Well, if we would have let the auto mall turn into apartments, we no longer have that opportunity to catch dollars, right? So where cities win, this is the end. We've got a whole bunch of things else. The way I'll sum it up is the only thing we can really affect is to try to grab more sales tax dollars from other cities, from other residents, right? Whether it's our own or them. The way that it works, the sources of revenue that we have, there's only two ways to raise revenue. One is we raise our own property taxes on our own people, right? Or we collect more taxes from sales tax. It's the only way, right? And that's dependent on those businesses being physically on Harriman's side of the line where people spend or others.
There's
So
another aspect of that too.
The way I've described it is
Population based.
we need to set up our nets, right? where now others are gonna be filling in around us. If we have that foresight as we have, auto mall, be a commercial, right, to catch those dollars coming in and out. I've said this since the first day. I think sat in a chair as a resident back there is, look, we're in a cul-de-sac. We have to be realistic about our ability to do what I just said. Right? So how do you get more people coming and going to catch those dollars? Well, the one thing we have that others don't is our proximity to recreation. Right? Whether that's the mountain or what we can carve out with the athletic complex, et cetera. So there's my 3-minute summary of a financial plan.
That was 4.5.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. When we're talking financial sustainability and stability, when we're looking at that, part of that is what are our revenues? What are our expenses? What have we said we're going to buy? What
What
we
are the
have
things we
to?
can do? We can't. It's one thing to say, well, we want these things and they're important to us, but can we actually?
To be fair,
do it?
it's taken 3 years just to figure out what we already
Oh,
owed.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, I mean,
Right.
the-
I said that first part, right?
yeah, we've barely gotten just understanding, revenues and.
So I'd almost say
So it's
we've,
like, like so kind of moving
we-
through those gears. But
yeah, we've kind of hit the
First area.
stability side, and now it's how do we make it sustainable?
Sustainable.
Right? We figured out some of that unknown.
I want to understand that a long term too, because those are, I think we're moving through short term goals as far as figuring out what we owe, those kind of things. How do we make enough revenue to pay our obligations? But I think long term goal, we have to even look beyond just obligations, because I think part of the council vision will be, what do we want our city to be and how can we?
Aspirations.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because then how's our financial stability?
realistically
Yeah.
attain those.
Exactly. And what do we have to do to get to that point to where it can match that vision?
I think we have to be realistic, like I said. Can,
Yeah, exactly. Aspirations sometimes are not attainable. So are they attainable or not? And if they are, what's the path to get to those?
Okay.
Wrap it.
So we're going to take these. I don't know if they'll end up being 4 goals or out of that, or if they'll end up being merged into some other things and start to, what you may have is here's this, and then there's these sub goals underneath to try and then we'll take those and, because you can't have a swing for the fences. Hey, this is going to change in 10 years and wait 9 years to work on it.
Right.
You've got to take baby steps along the way to get there. So that's part of this conversation. So this has been, I think, helpful for me to really understand what some of those words mean. So the next time we'll bring you back that strategic plan. Like I said, I'm gonna swap some sections, but I would really like to understand maybe defining some of these words a little bit more carefully. We'll bring some goals. If we miss the mark, it's because we probably don't understand your definition, but we're going to try. And then that's an opportunity to, I think, to really dig down and say, of just these things we're talking about, this word means this to us.
I think you
Here's-
need to weave that question you have on your board to weave it into everything. How does it affect the resident?
We can have a few minutes. So think about that as well. What are the lenses? And I use the word lens. How should we look at problems as they come? And so this is usually something that it's often in a plan. It's like, okay, we're going to use this as our frame of reference whenever anything comes in. So as we as staff, we're going to bring it back. Again, you don't have to agree with how we interpret that, but that's how we'll try and look, instead of just being wide open all the time to, well, we should do this or that. We're going to do this because we think it meets this. So we've already started doing that, but we'll define that. So I'm going to end so we can take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Take the quick
We'll take
picture
a
of
quick
this
pause
and
while we
erase it.
shift around. So.
A big part of that.
Oh, my gosh. I'm sorry, Wendy. Sorry, Teddy. Okay, we're gonna jump to item 2.2, a discussion regarding a proposed commercial development at 134th South. Blake.
John, I have two presentations in there. The one that has the format I always use, mine, the PowerPoint. And then we'll jump to the PDF when our friends join on. So while that's coming up, this is a project we've had a lot of anticipation for years. It's a project that's part of the town center, which we can jump right into here. The location is right off of 134th Mountain View Corridor. It's the corner of commercial that we've always planned on with the Harriman Town Center development. And so this is the land use plan from 2014. The spot we're talking about is in the bottom right hand of the screen. This is the main commercial center or the anchor for the town center. And so we were always told it would come when the housing was here. The housing's been here, so here it comes. This is the original concept from the what are they, design standards or whatever from the development agreement. So you can kind of see if I can forward this, there we go. This inset here shows the commercial center. Got the building staying clean too, so that's good. So this shows the original layout where the commercial center was going to kind of back on to the freeway. Of course, this was contemplated before Mountain View Corridor was even in, and Mountain View Corridor had moved a few places in the time that they were contemplating this to when it was approved. So there were a lot of assumptions made. We're now further down the road. We know where Mountain View Corridor is at. We just recently opened Harriman Rose Boulevard. And so, and we're also working with the Mountain View Corridor team. This is very conceptual, but this is their latest on the off-ramps and on-ramps for the freeway. And so you can see this is our project site. The yellow dots are the locations. The next slide, I'll show you the access points into the site. And then you can see there's a southbound freeway off-ramp. For northbound, the freeway off-ramps back just a little bit past Rosecrest, and you have to take the frontage road down and then 134th or 132 into the site. And then there's also, when you're leaving the site, you can get back onto the freeway right off of north of 13200 South, or back onto the freeway down close to Rosecrest Road. So really good access to the site. It's always been planned. There will be a traffic study coming as part of the development agreement that'll show how all this flows and works. And then this is the general site layout. The development team here, they'll be able to speak a lot better to this, but I just kind of wanted to show this 13200 South or Harriman Rose Boulevard. It's on the top of the page. You can see where the existing CVS and McDonald's are located. And so your key access will be, there's a couple of accesses onto 134. There's one access for the residential and can get down into the commercial off of Fort Harriman Parkway, and then 132 has the main access on the north side. So really, I guess, go back to that. You can see the uses over here too. We've got some retail, some restaurant planned uses. The residential is apartments on the north end, and then the access points. So there will be a handful of agreements that'll be coming to both the Planning Commission and City Council over the next few months. We're targeting the end of this year to get full approval on this. So the master development agreement will come to both the Planning Commission and City Council. Planning Commission, obviously, recommendation to the City Council for final approval. In that, we're planning on having design guidelines to spell out what the center will look like. All the other things that our design guidelines have. Traffic impact study to verify that everything's going to work, everything's going to flow. As I said, this has been planned since the beginning of the town center, so we don't have any anticipation that there will be any issues there. But we do know the city plans to put a signal in on Fort Harriman Parkway and Harriman Rose, so this will help us out with the timing and when that needs to come in. And you saw access off of 134th. There might be some modifications to the median in the center of the road there that we'll need to accomplish at some point to make sure that we can keep traffic flowing in and out of the site. And then parking analysis, there, first blush with the site plan, looks like there's oodles of parking, but we just want to make sure that the parking's in the shared parking agreements and everything are working and that we can make it all flow, increase the quality of life for everyone that goes here. So the incentive package, this will only come to the city council. These will be agreements typically that we've done with other larger developments, usually commercial. There's one different one is an impact fee agreement. And the reason we're kind of contemplating this one is the infrastructure in this area has all been constructed as part of the CDA for the town center. So there's an existing agreement the council approved last year to reimburse the master developer for the town center. And so the impact fees would come in and that infrastructure is already constructed. So it's kind of a double dip. So makes sense. And the economic benefit for this center is anticipated to offset the impact fees. Impact fees are one-time money, sales tax, and everything else is recurring income. The participation agreement would be coming to the CDRA board as the council wearing that hat. This one will identify the improvements needed. So there is some landscaping that we've discussed, and the developers also planned on building to a higher standard than our typical C2 standard in general, and putting in some different materials and things. So this will help offset those costs that they'll incur on some of these nicer products they're putting in. And then the sales tax agreement, it's just encourages rapid development of the site, making sure that things are moving along and going. So anyway, with that, I can answer any questions now, or we can just turn the time over to our development team.
Sorry. Can you address, I think as a council, we've all heard about this, but for the planning commission's sake, can you address why there's the housing component?
Yes.
The need for the housing component?
That's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. So the participation agreement is with the CDA, and recent legislation requires that we have to have housing if we're going to give an incentive from the CDA. So in order to provide that incentive and offer those funds to the developer, we have to have a housing component, and a portion of that has to be the affordable housing. And so we've been working to contemplate that and incorporate that into the housing product. So great question. Is there anything else?
So I'll just say on that, it's really a non-negotiable. That's really a non-negotiable to follow the state law. That's why the housing is there. It's going to program the area as well, but that's why that is there. It's not, the council hasn't anyway, but.
Does the housing portion and commercial portion need to be separated? Or can they be?
It might be a better question for our development team.
Can they be
probably
a
have
mixed
some ideas.
use product that, you've got your residential above, your commercial spaces, your retail spaces?
Got some images we could show. Yeah.
Okay.
As far as the law goes, I think it's just within the CDA project area.
Yeah.
So the project area is all of the town center. So it can include everything, but we're using this one as its own area. So I think we need to include it into this town center or this area as well.
It can't be existing housing. It has to be new. That's under state law.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the law does require a certain percentage of the land. So I think
It's a square footage based on the amount of retail. There's a formula, but we've been working with them and they've got it. So I think if you see some of their designs,
If you look at the design, it is very much a horizontally integrated, residential commercial component. There's a huge stairwell thing kind of in the middle that brings people back and forth between things.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good concept.
Yeah,
overall.
intentionally that way. I think that their design was not intentionally not to be.
Has vertical been analyzed yet to see which one gives the most bang for your buck for both the city and the development team?
I think, I can't speak to all of it. I can say that, that they're working with some realtors or some, retailers that have some specific requests that, I think are part of this as well.
Figured out the laser. All right, good. Hi, everybody. Nice to see some of you again. My name's Sean Hardy. I'm with Elevated Property Company. Steve Brazo and Chris Byers are also here with Elevated as well. Really excited to give a progress update on the project that we've named the Commons at Harriman Town Center. First, though, I want to give just a brief overview of Elevated and who we are. Elevated Property Company was founded by Fred Bruning, Sean Dennison, and Chris Byers as a joint venture with Ball Ventures and Ball Ventures Alquist. Fred Bruning, our founder and CEO, he was also formerly the founder and CEO of CenterCal Properties, which you may be familiar with. He was also formerly the real estate director for Sears, Roebuck and Company. He's been doing retail developments in the state of Utah for over 40 years. Chris, Sean Dennison, and myself are all formerly CenterCal employees as well. Chris Byers is our Chief Revenue Officer. Sean Dennison is our COO, also founders of Elevated as well. These next couple of slides are just highlighting our past Utah project experience. Mountain View Village nearby in Riverton, Station Park in Farmington, and also Canyon Corners in Park City, the Whole Foods anchored center. And then these next images are just to showcase the gathering spaces that we like to develop in our projects. These are CenterCal properties that Chris and Sean and Fred all worked on in their time. This is the Veranda in Concord, California. Very active space, well-used seating, water features, fire pits, very inviting. Again, this is the Veranda. More Veranda, you can see the green space, families, very active. This one is the Village at Meridian in Meridian, Idaho. Again, very, very active, lots of people, seating, fire pits, water features. These are really nice components for the atmosphere that we're trying to create for these gathering spaces. More Village at Meridian. Again, the green space. This is also at the Village at Meridian. You can see the children, the parents, the hardscape, the seating areas, the festoon lighting, really nice atmospheres that we like to create. So now getting into the Commons itself. The Commons is 34 acres. It's 215,000 square feet of retail, currently at 226 multifamily residential units in the northwest corner. If I kind of go around the horn here, this is building A, multi-tenant building. Building B here. Building C is up on 134th. And then building D there. And then 6 pad buildings. And then this is the residential component here. But the heart of this project is really going to be this gathering space here, framed by the residential to the north. And so, these are both programmed as restaurants, kind of bookending this circular gathering space that kind of sits down below the residential. So you will walk up these steps to get up to the residential or down to the retail and this really nice kind of cozy environment. So some of the inspiration for the gathering space is kind of the natural landscape surrounding us, the Bingham Canyon Mine, Kelsey Peak, Bell Canyon Waterfall. You'll see some of the odes to these as we kind of focus in on the gathering space. And so again, you've got this kind of interesting sunken garden effect here in that kind of semicircle that will be a really kind of secure, kind of cozy atmosphere, again, flanked by the 2 restaurant patios. And then Fred has coined these as the Harriman Steps, as an ode to the Spanish Steps in Rome. And so you will, the idea being if you're a resident up in this, residential building, you're just a few steps walking distance down into this retail environment. So, this will be the commons. And then if you just look at all the different components, you're going to have some really interesting linear gardens and linear paths, walkways to get up or down to this retail environment. The terraced seating, the concrete bench, concrete hardscape, that central play area, and a water feature to kind of create that waterfall type effect. Some really nice components in this central area. It's really kind of the focal point. So this is kind of a look at A and B, the residential massing in the background there. This is another look at A and B. It's kind of lacking the depth on the elevation, but you walk up to the residential. So these residential will give you that kind of mixed use feel, very integrated and kind of framing the retail in the background. So this view is lacking some of the center components, but it's really designed to just show you, this is like a walk down into the center gathering space or courtyard. The restaurant patios on either side. And then a really nice walking path down to building C. So the residents are able to access down to that building C. So it's all very cohesive and accessible and pedestrian friendly. It's all connected. An architectural elevation of A and B, contemporary architecture, very warm colors, warm color palette. We tried to articulate the end caps nicely. The tenant signage is really going to pop off of these buildings when those go on. And we're going to use locally sourced building materials in terms of the stone and the brick. And so we think they're looking really nice. This is building C. Again, very warm textures and colors and stone veneer. Also building C. Building C. This is a view looking north. Building C here, you can see the pedestrian path to kind of connect A and B and the residential in the background. Just a black and white site plan, almost more of a parking exhibit. We're currently at just under 5.8 for the whole center for the retail. The residential is at about 1.75 per unit currently. And then the next slide is just overall timing. These are kind of our rough timing goals. The entitlements portion is up at the top. We'd like over these next 3 months to get through entitlements and the various participation agreements with the goal of getting those executed mid-December. Our construction documents kind of being complete and finalized by March. And then in for permits and permitted end of April, early May, with the goal of starting construction kind of early summer, beginning of May. That's going to put us in a good spot to start as much as we can before the winter months. And it's going to put us in a good spot to get our first tenant openings by October of 2026. And then the residential and the big box would likely open in 2027, the next year. So if we can beat this, we'd love to, but this is kind of rough goals. And so that's the presentation. And Chris, Steve, and I are happy to answer any questions or go back to any slides or anything like that. Really excited for the project and excited to be here. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, could you tell us what goes into the decision-making process for doing apartments instead of condos?
I don't know if condos are technically part of the legislature or not, but a component in the legislature needs to be that affordable component. And so the for rent product, I think, is better suited to meet that legislative requirement.
I just know home ownership is also a goal too, and so, but maybe, is it just a cost thing then?
No, it's not a cost thing as much as we've never really done condos. And we are partnering with a residential developer who does multifamily, and that's just the program essentially.
Okay.
There's been discussion that the cities working with us and trying to change some of the rules around how they're struggling statewide to get those spots.
Mhm.
But it's that some of those, I think, unintended consequences of other rules and laws that have been passed and some things that have happened in other states. A lot of the big financing groups will not, they're just not going to put money towards condos at the moment. I think when the building collapsed in Miami or in Florida, that changed a little bit of how those big groups are looking at condos and condo associations. So I think you'll see some movement try to get the legislature to maybe pass some things. Probably not going to affect this project, but other projects we've been talking about for Harriman. How do we get affordable housing and multifamily?
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Go back to the site plan. Get back to the site plan. Question, so there's that road that goes in between the residential and the commercial. How wide is that? Do you know?
I don't know how wide that is off the top of my head, but it's just one lane in each direction.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, one of my thoughts was, either making like an elevated sidewalk across the road or something that gives the pedestrians priority over the cars. Or even going over or under
I
to
think,
provide a safe walkway.
I think like whether it's pavers or striping, I think that makes a lot of sense at that connection point for sure.
Yeah.
While we're talking traffic and vehicles and whatnot, I know Mountain View Village, there's some concerns I have whenever I visit there. The throats to some of the driveways to get in and out of the parking stalls are pretty tight. So I'm hoping as we look at this and the circulation of traffic within the parking areas, I appreciate seeing the pedestrian amenities and being able to try and integrate those into the system as well, but make sure that you can have one vehicle waiting to leave while another vehicle can enter into the parking lots, which does not happen all the time in Mountain View Village as well. So hopefully some things have been learned and we can do some things better here.
In a previous iteration of the site plan, we had a little bit of parking right here, which we ended up removing because we didn't want cars to stop and jam up this area. So we did get rid of those kind of we want to get people in and into the parking lot. So we are aware. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that as well.
Yep.
Yeah, just make sure you've got the width you need so that vehicles can.
Yep, definitely.
Supposed to be like
Properly.
trucks in Utah.
Yeah, that's.
I drive a truck,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's me, but yeah, you can't get two trucks in and out, trying to traverse the same area in Mountain View Village. It's
Very,
difficult.
very narrow roads.
Very.
But this is a really, at least conceptually, much improved.
I would hope, I would hope so.
Landscaping plan that like map that I can see of landscaping on
We
here?
have a draft. It's not ready to be submitted.
Right.
Like that. I can show you a color plan. I can say there's way too many trees on the edges. So
Trees are good.
it's probably over landscaped. But I do have a color plan on the previous slide.
Okay.
That's a lot of.
I was gonna say, just my only kind of concern is the heat from the south sun, especially in the summer, hitting those smaller commercial retailers. Where you right next to the kind of that centerpiece that you have that meets with the residential. But it looks like you have some trees there that are gonna provide some shade, so that should be good.
That's kind of going to be the mature trees, mature landscaping, and
Yeah.
kind of going where we're going to focus best elements.
Okay.
So as an architect, I look at kind of the precedents that you're using for your architecture of your buildings. And knowing that you guys did Mountain View Village right across 134. I mean, they're pretty much going to be sister developments. So I'm assuming, number one, you're not gonna be using the same kind of retail, same kind of restaurants, any of the same kind of businesses just because of proximity. And I think that Mountain View Village is very successful, especially architecturally. I think it's very, very successful. But I'm a little concerned looking at the elevations that we're stepping down quite a bit from Mountain View Village. When it comes to architecture. I think that it was very successful. There may be some issues with parking and things and driving within Mountain View Village, but being right across the street from each other, I'm a little concerned that we're kind of stepping down architecturally quite a bit. What- Right.
This is the same architect that designed Mountain View Village. And, I can see where you might be saying that because sometimes those taller buildings, that massing makes it feel somewhat different. But, I think that the finishes that we've chosen and the design is, timeless is what we kept talking about. We want this
Right.
to be timeless and not trendy and not anything that, once we open is going to be outdated. So.
Sure. Well, I'm just seeing a lot more kind of stucco and things that aren't in Mountain View Village. Mountain View Village is great because it has solid, brick buildings, even concrete
This-
block
this-
buildings,
this is
but
block. It's not designed.
it's not designed for stucco. Okay. It may just be the way that it's appearing and stuff.
It could be.
Yeah, I got you.
But it is a block building with stone veneers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the site plan again? I'm just curious about, on the overall layout. I think for me, like I like Mountain View Village, but some of the things that make it hard is there's not a lot of clustering. Well, in Mountain View Village, you kind of have the outer part where you have the big box stores, and that's easy to walk to. But if you have to cross over to like other buildings, it's almost like you want to get in your car, to go to there. So I'm just curious as far as like, if you're in that kind of circular commons, and you want to get over to this I guess southeast, is there a decent way to get there?
Highlighted the pedestrian connection down to C here.
Okay.
So pretty nice, easy walk for a resident to just go through the steps and go straight down. This is really the heart of the center, and these are gonna be kind of restaurants and banks and financial services, so.
Okay.
More pad users than, this is kind of the active retail center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So parking wise, parking that you're showing, are you in relation to the requirements code wise for parking? Are you above? Are you at? Are you below?
We're slightly below on some of the pads, but we're above for the whole center, we're above.
Okay.
I have no questions, but I'm pretty giddy about getting this going. I'm super excited about seeing these plans. We've been meeting and talking, and we're really excited to have something for consumption for our public. So thank you.
Is there on that timeline, a date when you're gonna be announcing some of the potential tenants and?
We're a little too early for that. The tenants are really sensitive to that information getting out there, so I don't have a timeline for when that will happen, but it's too early today.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sure.
We have to be really careful. As soon as we can.
Like a year, or like 18 months, 2 years?
I hope it's not that long, but some might be.
Well, that being said, what is the interest? You got some
Oh, yeah, we have a
pretty,
lot of interest.
lot of interest and a lot of this being built will be occupied fairly quickly then,
yeah.
as you're seeing? Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I
good.
mean, you know, we did the center across the street. I personally leased that and it was a lot. And it's a lot of retail over there. This is like, I feel like I could do this in my sleep. So,
Yeah.
no, this is exciting. And, you know, we're really, really excited about how this is laid out, how it's integrated into the residential, how it's working with the whole Harriman Town Center. So it's pretty exciting.
Great.
Does that affect like what's it's pretty good?
No, it isn't. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna see duplication.
Yeah.
Just because the tenants know about that, but it doesn't affect like who we can work with, by any kind of.
Yeah, so, yeah, but not bring more, you can't bring more.
No, not at all. But, you know, we do have to go deeper and find different tenants. So we want to make this unique, not make it look like every project. So.
Yeah, I like that even about that architecture, like what you're saying. I don't want it to look exactly like Mountain View Village. It needs to have, even though it's gonna be a lot the same, and it's across the street, it has to have its own unique look and feel about it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think more of my ones based on.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. It's just quality.
But
Quality, right? Yeah, yeah.
For my own clarification, and maybe others in this room, can I go back to the vertical, the residential and why the idea of having a vertical? You said that Mayor, you said that corner's off limits. Does the law read that it has to be residential at ground level? Or couldn't you have it up a story and have the same amount of residential? We just had a discussion of financial stability and forecasting finances into the future. And Councilman Jared mentioned that there's really only two sources of income that comes into a city: personal taxes or retail revenue. Couldn't we get the most out of this by putting commercial on a lower level, gain the revenue from that, qualify for the state code in high density housing or low income housing by putting it above the commercial?
So you're just adding more retail.
But I think
Adding
that
more
that was
retail?
discussed quite a bit. I think part of it was simply because the configuration of the lot and just being able to get good access and visibility to certain retail. Is that you guys?
It's also a different construction type to go to build a podium with commercial on the ground level. And it just becomes not feasible. So that is a bit of a cost issue. It's just kind of a totally different product.
Well, and it does affect the retail on the bottom, because if you're trying to vent through apartments for restaurants above, it gets incredibly expensive. And it also, once you set those chases, that's where you have to vent from, and there leaves you no flexibility for that. Yeah, for future tenants.
Well, I'm looking at the layout of this, right? Residential, it'd be hard to get commercial access or people getting into
Yeah.
that area with the residential as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the way this is laid out now.
It completely new plan.
Yeah.
Well, we really wanted to take advantage of the slope on the land too.
There's a ton of.
So there's a huge grade change, and so it almost feels like the residential is above the retail just because it sits higher, and hence the Harriman Steps. It provides great, Instagram photos for the kids and opportunities to really brand this center out there amongst everybody. So I think it works to a lot of advantages to have it separate, but still apart.
the retail, the big retail building, that's kind of in the lowest part of the site, correct?
It's
elevation wise, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, how tall is that building? Or how tall do you foresee it? Do you see it a 30-foot
I think-
building, a 60-foot
I think
building?
it's approximately 30 feet. It is
It's a box, so it's.
Okay,
I think it's around 30 feet.
so as you drive behind it, you'd be almost looking over it, similar to what you have on the other.
Actually, like, although this might be lower in relation to the residential, it will sit up above 132 and Mountain View corridor. So this is a little retaining wall. So you're elevating up as you go west. So the box will sit up above about 15 feet higher than the street.
Okay.
So you won't ever really be looking down at it.
Which will be good for the apartments too and have view corridors too.
Yeah, and these views looking south are just gonna be.
Yeah, which even for economic wise, it'd be really nice to have that sitting up a little bit when people are driving down. Oh, we want to go shop there. Yeah.
I'll look down on the roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
across the way.
They'd have a hard time driving past it, not knowing it was there.
You're gonna know. You're gonna know.
We'll
it's
know
there.
it's there.
One of my best pictures in Harriman is actually going down 132 and looking at the mountains at a sunset over Mountain View Village. I'm serious. It's the most beautiful picture that I've ever taken in my entire life. It's just looking over those. And I have no problem seeing the mountains over retail.
Except for in Harriman, we want people to see the retail. We don't want them to see it in Riverton.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm not sure if you've drilled down to this point or not within the residential, but within that residential area, do you know which building, or is it gonna be spread out as far as the affordable housing options
The preference is for it to be
interspersed throughout? Okay.
I think that works.
Yes.
Mhm.
Agreed. Yeah.
For the entire site plan minus the residential, there's 3 exits, correct? One on 134, one on Fort Harriman, and then one going up to 132, or whatever it is. Oh, there's 2 right there, sorry.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be a light right there, right?
Fort Harriman
Fort Harriman.
and Harriman Rose will have a traffic signal, yes.
No interconnectivity from CBS. It looks like there's shared driveway there, but you don't tie into the,
So you could access it right here
yeah, but not on the backside or from the other access from CBS.
on this side.
Yeah, yeah, it's, yeah, I understood.
So has traffic looked at that light location and how far it's gonna get backed up from Mountain View corridor onto 130?
Which
Four.
light location?
The new one.
The new
The
one.
new one? It's been looked at in our master plans for years, so yeah, the queuing on that road is not a concern.
Yeah, because I know that it backs up, right now it backs up almost all the way to Mountain View corridor from Fort Harriman Parkway, so adding another light in there would just back.
Keep in mind that the transit corridor
Yeah.
is through this as well in the future, so that's always been put into the model in the 2050 model too, to contemplate that. Hopefully take some cars off the road, provide some other options.
And where's that located? That's located
Through median Harriman Rose.
It comes
Median.
out between the residential through here. There's a corridor preserved
Yeah.
and pops into the center.
Oh, so it's on the north.
And the
Okay.
good thing is if you're tired of sitting at the light, you just pull in and go shopping.
Yep.
Right?
Except for having a meeting that doesn't. It just takes one car to make it so you can't.
As long as the throat's wide enough, they can turn
Exactly.
into it. Right.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Blake is, whoa, that's loud.
Good
The
job.
developer's still considering building most of this at the same time, doing it once, or are you? phasing
Yeah,
it?
it's all at the same time. The residential will just take more months to build. So it'll be open, 2027 as opposed to some of the retailers opening up before. But yeah, it's all at once.
It's usually the
Looks like you're shooting for holiday season of 26.
Yes,
Right?
sir.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Another thing the council is going to have to think about is we have a Harriman City sign down on 134th that we're going to need to discuss what's going to happen to that because it's going to need to move. So keep that in your mind where we might utilize that somewhere else in the city. And I just want to say this development team that we've been working with for the last while, they're awesome. Like it's been great working with them. The questions have been, very intelligent questions. And I feel like we understand more about this site right now, even at the step where we're still pretty preliminary, than we do on a lot of sites that are ready to go to planning commission. So we're having a great time working with these guys.
You as well. Thank you, Blake. Great.
We're excited. Let's do it.
Get her done.
Build. But we appreciate it. I'll echo what Blake said. It's been, of course, mainly working with Sean, but it's been a pleasure and been receptive and trying to find a win for our city. And it's fun to have a partner like that that's helping us find a big win for our community. So we appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
guys.
Appreciate you.
Being here.
Yes.
Yeah, I think with that, we appreciate the planning commission as well being here. I think we'll go ahead and excuse, we don't need planning commission anymore either, right? Is that? I mean, you're welcome to stay, but it's gonna get exciting, but you're also free
They
to.
may want to stay for the
Or, yeah.
next development.
coming up. These just
Oh.
Rosecrest.
Oh, so we're on it then.
They were invited for this one.
Oh.
I had to.
We'd love for you to stay, hang out.
Excellent. Come on. Unbelievable. Next one is.
Let's do the status report. Yeah, let's do that real quick. I think, do 2.3 status report. Trevor, you want to hit that real fast for us?
I don't have anything to present. You've got the status report. If you have questions, we can go through it.
Would like to see the sales tax break out. Which is population, which is local. Because as with the discussion we were having earlier, the local one is the one that we can move the needle on. I'd like to see the progress of that broken out.
Amen.
I think just as a rule of thumb though, right now we're sitting at 1 part local and 3 parts state pot. So, yeah.
That's what I want to see, because
Yeah, I think it's important to see.
Misleading, it's like, oh, our sales tax is going up, but yeah, our population is too, and that's the main driver. So for us, the measurement of the things that we're talking about is the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe not necessarily even a part of this report, but something to be tracking there as a good data point is the amount of sales tax per capita that's coming from population, right? Make it a per capita calculation so we can kind of judge, are people spending more, at Amazon than they are in retail stores, that kind of a thing. I think it can help us show the buying habits and the spending habits of residents. Because if residents are buying more online stuff, we get point of sale credit for that, right? So just another data point to consider.
The only comments I would make is what I made earlier, just about our building permits went from 48 last year to 8, this year. And so back to the staffing and things like that, just being able to change with that internally without having to lay off staff or just being able to be fluid in that. And then just kudos on the projects. We've had some pretty major projects the last year or 2 years, and I'm really grateful those are coming to completion and getting done and wrapping up some pretty big projects. Main Street, 138th, 32nd, and 7300. Those are all I'm glad, big shout out to staff for getting those done.
We also just purchased a new software, Alpha Maps, to help us with a lot of these data points. So you'll be seeing a lot more refined as we learn it and figure out how to use it, especially.
That's right. It is a great tool, huh?
So we're excited to explore that a little bit more and see what we can pull out of it.
Okay, we appreciate it, Trevor. Thanks for your work on this. Okay, we want to try to start into this? We've got everybody here. Okay, we'll go to 2.4, discussion regarding the Panorama South Hills Rosecrest. Oh, Chase. We're going to start with Chase.
Another lawyer, gosh.
2 lawyers in the room is way too many. It's too many.
That's right.
Okay, Blake, we'll start with you. You can run.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a brief overview here and then turn it over to Chase and then ultimately Craig and his group. And their presentations always look so much cooler than mine because I think I'm using the same format for like 3 years now. But anyway, so this area, Trevor coined it today, the South Mountain Development Area. So I kind of liked it. Harriman South Mountain. I went to college in Arizona, so South Mountain is pretty important down there. It's the largest city park in the country. So anyway, so this is the area we're talking about. It actually encompasses 3 different projects. So we're kind of calling it South Mountain now, but it's Panorama. And I'll go through some slides here to kind of show it. Really what I'm trying to just highlight here is we need to be very clear which area we're talking about because we're going to have this conversation multiple times in the future here. We're going to talk about MDAs and each area has its own MDA or MDA amendment. And so we'll have to be, we'll do our best job, or we'll try to do our job to define which area we're talking about. But if there's ever any confusion, just ask, is this Panorama? Is this South Hills or is this Rosecrest? So this is the Panorama area. Always remember there's a little piece down to the west, just down by the community college, just sandwiched between the community college and the RSL Training Academy. And so, and it's actually part of the Harriman Business Center CDA, which we'll talk about later tonight. And some of Panorama is as well. We have the South Hills development, and this is the Wasatch Group. And we just brought through the 5th Amendment on this project. And this will be the 6th Amendment, but we're going to do an amended and restated agreement on this one. So it'll clean up a lot of stuff. And we're only going to address upper South Hills, we call it the above Mountain View corridor with that. So basically what's done is done. And what's new is going to be covered into this new agreement. And then remember, there's a non-contiguous piece on this one as well, as we're talking about it, that's up in the Panorama project. This has planned for some commercial area and some residential. Not vertical mixed use, though. Yeah, I don't know. And then the the last part is the Rosecrest development. And so this is sandwiched between the 2 developments. And Rosecrest is currently into the way the trust is set up, they're not a developer. They are just a landowner at this point. They're not going to be the developer this time. So, but we have to amend their agreement because some of their property is going into Panorama project and changing some things up. So we need to touch that agreement too and make sure it complies with everything that we're doing. So as we talk about all these applications and agreements and stuff that are coming, this is a list of all of them. Chase will get into it too with his presentation. It'll be a little bit more clear. But I just wanted to kind of show there's a lot of interaction that's going to happen here over the next few months with the Planning Commission, recommendations going to the council. There's general plan amendments, rezones, development agreements. There's a couple of things at the bottom here, the finance stuff that will only come to the city council. We have the PID, and there's some details with this PID that's a little bit different than other ones with some water that's being done. And there's 2 different entities. We've only done PIDs so far with 1 entity. So 2 entities always make it twice as hard. So we'll see how that goes. And then the reimbursement participation agreements. This is for Rosecrest. We have a handful of agreements that have been done in the past that have been kind of murky, and we're cleaning those up. And that's part of the deal here is to get those cleaned up and get all the financial stuff in this area understandable and in just to like a PID agreement and this reimbursement agreement. So anyway, with that, I just want to turn it over to our development teams that are working on this project, and they can tell you what they're planning on doing, and you can ask them the questions.
Like, before you hand to Chase, because Chase really confuses the room when he talks. What are we trying, I think this, we did this with the last NBA. What is the goal of tonight? Does that make sense? Like, what's the end point we're trying to get to tonight? So we don't get.
Great question. I don't think there's really an endpoint. This is a briefing right now to show, because we want to make sure everybody's clear on what is what, who's doing what, and what parts go to what development. So this is a briefing to get everybody together. Glad the planning commission's here because this will all be hitting with all these other projects coming. The last one we just talked about with Elevated. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming your way. So we just kind of wanted you to have a briefing on it all so we don't have to rehash a bunch of the background information when we get into it in these meetings. Remember, November and December only have one council meeting each. So we're going to be trying to cover a lot of ground in those meetings.
Thanks for asking that question, Mayor, because that's really where I wanted to start off, is just kind of let you know that tonight we're not here to talk about road cross sections and, you know, the details of our design standards for Panorama and Wasatch and Rosecrest. That's all going to come to you. A lot of it's been discussed with the city council, the planning commission, jointly, independently through a number of work meetings that we've had over the last year and a half, 2 years. That's still coming to you. So really, as Blake mentioned, this is just an overview of where we're at, how these three development teams have come together to kind of coordinate the land development on the South Mountain area. So with that, I'll just dive into it. And a lot of these, I'll just preface this by saying a lot of these exhibits match what Blake just presented. I'll talk about them in a little bit different light and add a little bit different context. But hopefully none of this is new or surprising to you, and it's stuff that you've seen before and is helpful for you. So again, this is just your vicinity map. This is the map that Blake had up earlier that shows the three different developments kind of just in one joint plan. We'll dive into the details about how they're broken up, what those areas look like, the number of units within each one. But I think it helps to understand what the scope of this really is and what each of these applications mean to get to this picture in front of you. Before I get into that, I wanted just to remind the council and the planning commission who everybody is in the room. A lot of times you just think of Wasatch, Rosecrest, and DAI in this instance, but really within the Panorama Development Agreement boundary, there are 14 different parties, 14 different landowners that have all kind of come together in what is probably one of the most difficult ways to organize landowners, but which has really led to a great end, as I hope you agree, and as we have kind of worked out with them. And then not only those landowners within Panorama, but coordinating with Wasatch and coordinating with Rosecrest on those adjacent developments. The current land use scenario out here, as Blake mentioned, there is the existing Rosecrest Development Agreement. This is what is currently adopted in Rosecrest's third amendment. It has 1,377 units remaining across all of the pods in that area shown on the map. Wasatch's land use plan, which as Blake mentioned, was just updated in the Fifth Amendment to the South Hills Development Agreement, has 1,439 units across that area. And then what is highlighted here is what we have called the unentitled area. So that's everything kind of sandwiched in between the existing Rosecrest Development Agreement, the existing Wasatch Agreement that just has an underlying base zoning. It's not included in any development agreement. And most of this base zoning is, I think, A143 is the new designation. So and again, you have 14 different landowners represented in this area that would be on their own developing a 5-acre parcel on the side of a mountain. So we've been able to compile all of these owners and bring them together for this master plan. So what has been proposed within this area looks a little bit like this overall. You've seen the Wasatch portion of this recently with their Fifth Amendment. And then here we have Rosecrest kind of here on the south end of this, and then Panorama up in here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we're going to go into detail with each one really quick, but you've got the overall lot legend, and this represents 3,476 units. I think one thing that's important to point out is that of those 3,476 units, there are about 2,800 that are already entitled under the Rosecrest and Wasatch development agreements. So the delta on what is being added to that unentitled land is a net of 660 units approximately. I'd have to go check my math on that, but a density of like 3.2, 3.3 units per acre. I know that's one thing we talked about previously when we had looked at this master plan. And I just wanted to reiterate that, right? That 80% of these units are already entitled under a development agreement. What's being added represents approximately 3.4 units an acre. Here we have the boundary again of the Rosecrest development agreement. Could have used Blake's slides, would have saved me a little bit of time. But Panorama, thank you. This is the Panorama boundary of the development agreement. Again, this is 1,716 units. You'll notice it is a little denser than some of these other areas simply because you have your largest area of density around some of those corridors by Mountain View, Juniper Crest, and the commercial areas. Wasatch Development Agreement area, the South Hills Wasatch Development Agreement area. This represents again 1,439 units in their development agreement over an area of about 530 acres. 550. Thank you, Greg. And then the Rosecrest boundary. And this, the application applicable to this one, I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later, but really this is just a boundary adjustment, taking out any property not owned by South Bench Investment and putting that property into the Panorama MDA, and then holding that area under South Bench Investment. And this is 321 units over 250 acres approximately. Blake touched on this. I'll go over it one more time, break it down more specifically to each development group. The applications that have been submitted that will really all run in tandem with the other applications for the Wasatch and for Rosecrest will be as follows. You've got a general plan amendment, a rezone application, a new master development agreement, and a group of public infrastructure districts for Panorama. To get what was on the map, this is what we would have to do at a minimum to get there. Really, the detail, as Councilmember Henderson says a lot of times, is in the development agreement. We've been working with staff on that to make sure that what's shown on the map is detailed in that development agreement, and that'll come before the Planning Commission and the City Council for additional discussion, as will these other items as well. With the exception of the public infrastructure districts, those will go straight to City Council. South Hills will have the same set of applications, a general plan amendment, a zoning map amendment. As Blake mentioned, they'll have an amended and restated master development agreement, which will be their sixth amendment to their overall master plan. And then they will also have a group of public infrastructure districts. And then Rosecrest application looks much simpler on the land use side of things. They simply have a fourth amendment to their master development agreement. And that again is just to amend the boundary to take out any property not owned by South Bench Investment and account for the number of units and the open space, which are all part of their original agreements. So as you look at that, it looks like a lot. And it is. I'm not trying to minimize any of it, right? It is a lot, but you know, as we talk about this overall master plan, the pieces all work together. There's going to be some delicate discussion that we're going to have with regard to, hey, this discussion applies to this development agreement or this area, but overall, they all have to work together, or else it just doesn't work. And so, as we're talking about a general plan amendment, to Wasatch and to Panorama, we're really talking about just a general plan amendment for the city in this area. Same thing with the zoning map, same thing with the unit counts. So again, I don't want to minimize this, but I also don't want any of us to feel overwhelmed by this, because I think all of that is just a procedural requirement that you're very familiar with that gets us to that end map. I went over my 7 minutes that I said I was going to stick to, but I got pretty close. 4. I did say 4. Are we on the record? You're right.
Surprising, you have never done that before.
I know. So again, would love to sit here and answer questions for the next 3 or 4 hours, but all of this is going to come in front of you again, right? We're not trying to rush it through or get back-to-back meetings. We'd love that. I don't know how we can coordinate that as well, but this is all going to come in front of you again, and this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be those applications. They're all going to be there. We're going to have Wasatch there. South Bench will be there. Everybody will be combined to answer questions related to these specific land use items. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of open space because of grading in this area. So there's a lot of green space. One thing I've always been, I guess, worried about is as far as, because there's a lot of density too, is just programmed space for these people in this area. So not that I don't want them to come in other parts of Fairfield, but it's like for this big of an area, is it sufficient to basically for the needs of all the people that would be there?
Great question.
Baseball fields,
Yeah.
soccer fields, just programmed areas.
So soccer fields are hard to build on the side of a mountain. Not that we couldn't do it. But the approach that we've taken is a little bit different from what the city has done historically. I know that with the Wasatch with the Rosecrest development agreement, for example, there's a 20% open space dedication requirement. As we've gone through this process over the last few years, we've looked at what the city's level of service is in your parks master plan and said, we're going to meet that and exceed that by actually improving already dedicated open space. So there is an area off this map that's up here now that we're calling Panorama Park that is really just a detention basin or a natural wash that we have worked with staff to kind of plan a dog park, pump track, some trails, make improvements to those open space areas that people can use within this community. So
Kind of that narrow strip that goes up the hill.
right by Juniper Crest, Juniper Crest intersects it. Right.
And that'll have connectivity to the existing trail system.
It's the red one.
I will say, we've got to go quick because we've got to get upstairs too, but.
I just wanted to put this up really quick. Mainly, I guess Craig can talk about it.
Well, yeah, that's another huge area of open space that we're planning on doing in conjunction with Panorama. So we've been working together. There have been multiple parks, trails, and open space maps and iterations that we put together. Wendy has seen a few of those as well. Mike has seen a few of those as well. So what we're planning to do is once we get our ARMDA in place and they get their MDA in place, it was asked that once those are done, we come back in conjunction together with the parks, trails, and open space and give it the dedication and the time that the city would like to see it have, if that makes sense.
What's your guys' timeline? Like,
Driven by water. Right now, it's all driven by water. The whole thing is driven by water. If we had water tanks, we'd be building right now.
so say 5 years, 10 years, 15 years,
25 through, we're
25 years.
Our phase one is we want to be done by the end of 2025, which we don't think we'll be able to do because of the water tank situation. So we want to be finished with the Wasatch portion completely by the end of 2027. That's our goal.
More building permits, I think.
Okay. That's all good stuff though, Steve.
Are we good then? Are you comfortable with that?
Last piece I'll add, we're finishing up with staff, obviously, but our goal is to come back to the planning commission on October 2nd.
Okay.
And city council, October 23rd. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Sorry to be break at the end.
Thank you.
No. Look for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, everybody. What do you?
Yeah.
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate that.
Glad you guys could come. It's kind of fun, right?